Hey everyone, it's Blake. Welcome in to episode number 3 of our WWE 2024 Save in TEW 2020. This is our fantasy booking for the Royal Rumble episode. And again, if you watched the previous 2 episodes, gave you guys some options. And the decision was made. We're going to start the actual series here after the Royal Rumble, which will be February week 1. And also pitch some ideas on how should we handle kind of an in-between episode between, the introduction to the series and the actual start of the series, because it's kind of a bit of a time span in there. So we decided, hey, let's have some fun. Let's maybe do some booking ideas for the Royal Rumble. So this is kind of half. Here's how I would maybe book both the men's and women's Royal Rumble matches, and here's maybe how I think WWE could book the men's and women's Royal Rumble matches. So it's kind of half predictions, maybe half, hey, here's some ideas. Like, it's not really, here's what I think is going to happen 100%. I just don't think that's the case, because as you'll see, I have this kind of broken up into different categories, meaning there's some wild card picks, there are actually multiple Final Four options, as you'll see on the screen here in a second, and then I have my picks for who I think the final 2 will be in each match, and then who the winner would be. Again, I will tell you if I think it's a prediction or it's exactly how I would do it, but they kind of maybe go together a little bit. So again, we are going to start after the Royal Rumble, February week 1, so you can see our schedule moving on from there. But let's have some fun with the Royal Rumble and see what we can come up with both the women's and men's Royal Rumble matches. All right, so let's start with the women's Royal Rumble match. And as I said, I'm going to break this down, each of these, into some wild card choices perhaps, and how that could impact the Final Four, the winners, all that kind of stuff. And again, we'll kind of go from there in terms of talking about some wild card picks, talking about our Final 4 picks, Final 2, and then the winner for each of these matches. So as you can see, for the Women's Rumble, we have 3 wild card choices on the screen here. Naomi, who, again, as you guys probably know, seems to be heading back to WWE soon enough. I don't know that she's a wild card in that I think she will win, but I do think she's a wild card in terms of maybe how the match plays out itself. So could she make it to the Final 4? We do not have her in the Final 4. I will say we don't have any of these 3 on the screen in the Final 4 that we have for the booking of this women's match. But because I think it's very possible that if any of these 3 are in it, I do think there's a fine chance that if they are in the match, they will make it to the Final 4. And I'll talk about in a second who I think, perhaps could be replaced in some of these scenarios like this. But I do think Naomi's one of those. Trinity in Impact was, or TNA now, was doing a lot of good stuff. And again, there seems to be a lot of momentum for her making her way back. So she would be considered one of the wild cards. The second wild card, we're going to go to the far right of the screen. Mercedes Moné / Sasha Banks. And yes, I know, I've seen all the reports, like probably most everyone, that she is likely headed to AEW. But as we've seen in this era, hey, anything is on the table until we actually see someone show up in a certain company. No one thought CM Punk was coming back. I wouldn't say no one, but most people, it seemed, didn't think CM Punk was making his return. He did. And all the reports suggest that was not even a possibility. So I'm just going to put her here. I realize that, again, there seems to be a lot of things out there that will tell you that she is AEW bound and could be showing up soon enough there. But until that happens, I think she has to be listed in the wild card group, because what if, right? You can play the what if game. It's fun to do, all that. So we're just going to play the what if game with Mercedes Moné / Sasha Banks and throw her into the wild card mix, because if she is in this match, I think she's going to be in the Final 4. So I will say that here now. Speaking of, I will go stronger with this next choice, and it is the choice that is in the middle. And that is, of course, Jade Cargill, who we have seen on WWE television since she joined from AEW, but we've not seen her in a match yet. They kind of really hyped her up when she first signed. We saw her on screen, in multiple places, made her, seem like a big deal, which I think is always a great idea when you're bringing in, a new talent to your company, and especially one that does have, an audience already sort of built in, like Jade does from her AEW days. But I am just saying, I don't know if she's going to be in the match. I will say, looking at like the betting odds and all that, there seem to be a lot of people who think that she's going to be in this match. And I will tell you, I think this is interesting, because if she is in this match, for starters, I don't know how she's not in the Final Four. I also think if you're putting her in this match, I mean, look, Triple H if he's proven anything, like this guy is willing to go bold with moves, and we'll kind of bring some other ones up here in a second about how that could apply. Could they bring in Jade in her first match, and it is the most dominant performance we've seen, and she wins the Women's Royal Rumble right off the bat? Now, what does that do? It immediately puts her in a position where she has to deliver when it comes to a big time singles match at WrestleMania. And you guys can, again, debate whether you think she's ready for that. But that is something to keep in mind. It's not just winning the Rumble, it's knowing what winning the Rumble means, and that is going on to be, in a main event type slot at WrestleMania. I'm not saying, they'll headline it, but that at least puts you in that position. So I think this one's very intriguing with Jade, because if she's in there, you could always do the thing where, look, she goes and, eliminates 8 people in a row, and then somebody sneaks up behind her and throws her out. That's the nature of the Royal Rumble, right? It's certainly possible. She still comes out looking strong. You don't have to necessarily send her to the Final Four or put her in a position to win. But I do think that there is a lot of intrigue there, that if you want to make a huge splash, you put her in the Rumble. Maybe she gets to the final 2. Maybe she doesn't win. Maybe she gets down to that final group. There's a lot of ways you go about it, but I tend to think she's actually the most intriguing one of this bunch. But we all know that if Mercedes Moné winds up with WWE, despite reports, that she probably immediately becomes the most intriguing part of this wild card group. So I will say that up front with that, with this particular group right here. So these 3 I consider in the wild cards. All right, let's go to the Final Four. So these, again, half my predictions, half maybe how I would book it based on what we're seeing right now. I have 3 scenarios for the Final Four, and I'll go through these pretty quickly because, look, I think the Women's Rumble is just as intriguing as the men's just because of all the options that could be available, but we'll talk about it here in a second. So, option number 1 for the Women's Royal Rumble Final Four, I have what I'm going to call just the obvious option, okay? If you're just going to go with what I think could tell the most interesting stories based on how WWE has pushed these talents to this point, I'm going to say this is maybe the obvious option, and maybe it's too obvious. That is the foursome of Bayley, Becky Lynch, Nia Jax, Bianca Belair. And, again, it kind of speaks for itself, right? Bayley, Becky Lynch considered 2 of the favorites. Bianca has had success in the Women's Rumble before. WWE has pushed Nia like, she beat Becky one-on-one, right? Not a lot of people get that opportunity in a Raw match to do that, and she did it. And so they are pushing her like this unstoppable force. So could I see all 4 of these landing in the Final Four? Absolutely could, and I think this is the one, again, that if you just decided to pick maybe the top kind of people that are pushed, and also, I'm trying to remember, I thought I saw the graphic that they pushed for like this match. I want to say these are the only 4 women I saw on the graphic, so maybe that's also something that it's like, well, okay, that's kind of a giveaway, right? But again, it almost feels too obvious that this is the route they would go, because these are the 4 that I think are getting the most attention. But we always know it's the Royal Rumble. Doesn't always work that way. But if it does, this is, again, Final Four number 1 option. Final Four number 2, I'm going to go to NXT for Final Four number 2, because I think this is one, we've seen this in the past, and I think what's interesting now with Triple H kind of taking over things is you always feel like he's got, different sort of ideas, and I don't think trope's the right word necessarily, but there are different kind of story elements that he can hit on, I think, much better than we've seen in recent years in WWE. And one of those I think you could use here is not only tying in a history aspect where it is Becky Lynch, and obviously you see the NXT talent I have on the screen here is Tiffany Stratton. And okay, there's history between these 2, right? So there's history between Becky and Tiffany Stratton. There's obviously history between Becky and Nia Jax. History between Becky and Bayley. So you can tie all that kind of stuff in. But this would be the option where, let's say Jade's not in the match, okay? Because I think also if Jade's in the match, she could replace Tiffany Stratton here, and we just use, Jade as the option perhaps in this scenario. But if she's not, I do think I could see, an option here, and one that Triple H could go with, where you could push, what you feel like is one of your next big talents of NXT all the way to the finish here. And to me, I think just the way they've used Tiffany Stratton, again, kind of the history and the skills and the talent that's there, I think this is one that I would find intriguing. But again, it all depends on how you book the rest of the match and how you get to this point. But this is one that I do think that if they go the route of saying, okay, we're not going to go obvious, we're going to pick an NXT talent. We're going to sort of push them as far as we can push them here. If Jade's not the person that's inserted kind of into that slot, I could see a scenario here where Tiffany Stratton gets that push to really kind of push her as the next big thing coming up to the main roster and all that. Because, again, we have seen her and Becky have interactions, all those things before. It's clear how they value her. And so, yeah, this is one I could see. And, look, you could always do the sequence here, the way I would look at it. You could always do, okay, Nia's the one that eliminates Tiffany Stratton or whatever. Becky maybe eliminates Nia, those kind of scenarios. So there's fun to be had if you go the NXT route here with this one. All right, and then option number 3 that I have here for the women's. I actually have 3 options for the women's, only have 2 for the men. I feel pretty strongly about the 2 men's ones, as we'll get to in a second. But the women's options here for number 3, I have Bayley, Becky, Bianca. So that trio there that we had in one of the other options, the first option, the obvious option. And now we're going to add Kairi Sane to the mix, because this is where the damage control element comes in. If you want to really push that in terms of all the things that have been going on with damage control, and you want to take that to the Final Four, right? You could do it throughout the match. You could have different interactions. Obviously Asuka's there too. You could have the different interactions like that and not have to save some of this for the Final Four. But if you want to kind of raise the suspense a little bit, kind of add that tension in there a little bit more, you could take Kairi Sane all the way to the Final Four. Then you have to figure out, okay, what do we do from here, right? How do we go about this Bayley and Kairi Sane dynamic? We already know kind of what's going on in damage control, all this. So that at least would make it intriguing, in my opinion, to figure out exactly how you would do that. And I don't know that I have a great option. I haven't really thought it all the way through just yet, because, again, my mind's kind of thinking ahead on maybe what I think will happen. I don't know that this is one that will factor into the finish, but I could absolutely see it. So this is kind of what I think is the third option here, and one that I think could be a lot of fun to see, how this would play out, just based on the damage control element of a Final Four that includes, 2 members and everything that's been going on within that faction. So that is something that I find very interesting if this is an option. All right. So those are my 3 Final Four scenarios. You guys can tell me if you prefer any of those, which you would think is going to happen. Again, we can play 2 different games here. It can be what you would like to see happen, what you think is going to happen, all that good stuff. So that's kind of the obvious option, the NXT option, and then the damage control option. That's how we're going to label these 3. But again, you could go with the Final Four number 4, and that's the Jade option, or the Sasha Banks option, like any of those you want to use. So those are also elements in there too, and so that's just something to think about on that. Or, you know what, we could go with the Final Four number 5, and we call it the AJ Lee option, because the dream scenario where AJ Lee, the countdown hits at number 30, and her music hits. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that is one that, listen, I would be all for if it did, even if it's just a one-time thing, because I know she's got injury history and all that, and she's made it clear, I think, that she doesn't have any desire to return. But, hey, you never say never in Triple H's WWE, do you? So, all right, now let's get to the final 2. So the final 2, yes, it seems pretty predictable, doesn't it? Bayley and Becky Lynch. I have them as the final 2 here. Half prediction, half probably how I could see it happen. Although, I don't know. I think this is my prediction more so than how I would do it from a final 2 standpoint, because, again, I think there's so many other options you could work with. I wouldn't be as sold on this. And I'll tell you why. Actually, the men's match is going to factor into why I may not be as sold on a Bayley-Becky Lynch final 2. And I'll tell you why in a few minutes. But nonetheless, I think these are your 2 favorites, and I think getting it down to these 2 would make a lot of sense. You get the suspense of, is Becky going to win the match and, likely go on to face Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania, a match that they've already teased? Or do you get the scenario where Bayley is the one who finally wins the Royal Rumble from the 4 horsewomen, and is finally able to get that Royal Rumble triumphant win? Remember, this is Bayley, who's been through injuries and all this other stuff over the past couple of years and everything. And so can she finally get that sort of career-defining win in the Royal Rumble? I think that is something that is in play. And also what's in play is that if she wins, that then sets up the dynamic of what happens with damage control moving forward, knowing that Io Sky is the women's world champion. And that is why, for me, I think that is the most interesting story you could probably tell based on the road to WrestleMania. So I'm going to go with Bayley as the Women's Royal Rumble winner. I know she's probably considered the favorite by many people, but I just think that there's a lot you could do with that from a storytelling standpoint, having her win, and then that just makes the road to WrestleMania so much more interesting in terms of the dynamics, within the faction itself and how they respond, how Bayley responds. We all kind of know, I think, where this is headed, but I still think there's a lot you could do with that, and I think there's more you can do with that probably than just having Becky win the match. I think there are other ways to get Becky there, because I do think one element of having Becky eliminate Nia Jax could be interesting, because, again, Nia's beaten her one-on-one. Maybe Becky eliminates her to kind of get a little bit of revenge there, but maybe it's not officially settled. Then perhaps you kind of maybe have another showdown between those two to lead to the Rhea Ripley match. Oh, there's all kinds of ways you could do that, but I'm going to go with Bayley getting her long-awaited Royal Rumble victory here in the women's match. But like I said, the more I thought about it, I tell you, at first I wasn't sure about the women's Rumble in terms of, I don't know how this is going to play out. It may seem a little too obvious and all that, but when you really dive into whether it's just the wild cards, the potential returns, like, even a Liv Morgan, somebody like that factored into the mix, there's a lot of fun stuff that they could do with this women's Rumble. And that's why, even I'm joking about the AJ Lee thing, right? But just think about what that would do for a Rumble like that. I mean, it would just be incredible to see those kind of things. And again, I think that's just the unpredictability has been built in now in this Triple H era, and it did. I mean, the CM Punk thing was just kind of the height of that, but it at least puts it in your mind that these possibilities are there with all that, so it makes it kind of fun. But I'm going to go with Bayley as the Women's Royal Rumble winner. All right, let's go to the men's. Things get really interesting here. So you see on the screen, I don't have multiple wild cards on the men's side. I got one wild card, and it is none other than the newly appointed board of director to TKO himself, also known as the People Champion, The Rock. So I have The Rock as the only wild card in this men's Royal Rumble match because, to me, it's the biggest one, and it's the one that would, overshadow any other potential wild card scenario we could put in here. Look, if The Rock is in the match, I tend to think if he's in the match, he's going to win the match. Because here's my thing. If he's in the match and he doesn't win, then what's the payoff? Because someone has to eliminate him, right? And I suppose you could have a Solo Sikoa or Jimmy Uso or somebody like that eliminate him. Or maybe, Roman Reigns decides he wants to walk down and he gets involved and Rock gets eliminated somehow there. But I just don't think that there's the upside storyline-wise in having that happen. But you can also say, well, if they don't have The Rock win the Rumble, how do you get to Roman Reigns and The Rock? Well, I think that's pretty easy. I don't think you need the Rumble to get the Roman Reigns versus The Rock, if that's the direction they're going in for WrestleMania 40. So, if that's the case, this is where I think it's pretty plain and simple. If he's in it, I think he's winning it. If he's not in it, then okay, right? But if The Rock is in the match, I do wonder what your payoff is if he doesn't win it, because I just don't know that it does anyone favors if you put him in it to lose. Although, again, the interference theme could come into play and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to say it's not a possible thing, because certainly it is. But I tend to think it's maybe all or nothing here for The Rock. So I am fascinated by this whole situation. And I know some people maybe have a much better feel on this than I do. But I just love the way they've now built this up, because there is so much suspense in this thing to what's going to happen with The Rock. And is this match going to happen this year? I would have to think it is. Is it going to take away another match? We'll talk about that in a second. But The Rock is the wild card. And if he's coming in, my guess is at number 30, because you want that enormous crowd pop at number 30. And you also, here's another reason why I don't think putting The Rock in the Rumble is the best idea in the world, because you're risking an injury at that point. Even if the guy goes in and throws a couple punches, I still think you're risking injury. I mean, the guy was injured in the last time, he was in the ring, came back for an actual full-length type match. Is it really worth the reward to put him in here when you can easily get to The Rock and Roman Reigns without even needing to mention the Royal Rumble? That match sells itself without the Rumble involved. So I think the injury risk, I just don't think it's worth it. Because then if he gets in there and gets injured, then your entire booking is messed up. So I would keep The Rock out of this match unless they are just completely set on making it 100% clear that is going to be the main event of night 2 of WrestleMania. Then I think he's in it, and I think he wins it. But I don't know. For some reason, I just don't know if that happens. So, anyways. All right, so he's the only wild card. So we're going to get to the Final Four here pretty quick. All right, I have 2 Final Four scenarios for the Men's Royal Rumble match. And I'm going to tell you right now that I prefer option 1 here, and I will mention in just a second why that is. So, Cody Rhodes, Gunther, CM Punk, and yes, the returning Brock Lesnar. So here's why I really like this option. Because, for starters, what I think Triple H likes, and just seeing, kind of, again, hey, we like to have our fun booking stuff in TEW and all that, but you can also study a couple things, and you can learn some stuff in terms of, some of the things that he does try to do and the trends and certain themes that are there. I think for Triple H, the opportunity to not have Cody Rhodes and Gunther back in the Final Four again for a second straight year is too good to pass up. Just because of where they are, how they've been pushed. Those were the 2 guys last year, that stole the show in the Rumble, got to the finish. Gunther was the Iron Man, all that stuff. I think they're both going to be in the Final Four again this year. Could they be the final 2 remaining? It's certainly possible. Maybe they do it again, right? I don't think so, and you'll see why in a second. But I think it's too good to pass up this option of putting these 2 back in the Final Four again. So, if we go in knowing that, then we have to build out everything else. CM Punk's going to be in the Final Four. In any scenario I build out, Punk is there. And I'll just tell you that right now. We could go through 100 scenarios. I think Punk's there, without question. The reason why I have Brock Lesnar inserted in here is because, as you guys, again, you can hear rumors and all this other stuff. It does seem like if Lesnar's coming back, Gunther needs a WrestleMania opponent. This is a match everybody's kind of talked about for a while now. It does seem like there's momentum towards it based on what you see out there. If it's going to happen, then I think what you need is you need Lesnar, in my opinion, to eliminate Gunther, because that sets up the match. That sets up, the tension. It gets you the big pop, all this other stuff. Like it can. There are obviously other ways you can build it, but this is the Royal Rumble, and so sometimes we're just kind of. It's like, all right, if you're going to build a WrestleMania match, just have one guy eliminate the other, and boom, you can build the tension from there. And it's something I think can be that easy, especially with these 2 guys. Because, them just squaring off and having that stare down in the middle of the Royal Rumble would be significant. It would really be a huge thing. So I think this is one where I don't hate the idea of having Lesnar be the one to eliminate Gunther. Then it's like, okay, you're down to Lesnar, Cody, and Punk. Well, from there, the option's on the table where you have Punk eliminate Lesnar, given the history between the 2, and then that's also something you can work towards in the future, and I will mention why here in just a second. So I'm very interested by this one, because I think adding Brock to the mix, I know there's some people who are like, hey, done with Brock, he's coming back all the time, like I know there were some people that were in that kind of space for a while there, but there is value in having Brock Lesnar, especially in a Royal Rumble match, in all the things he brings to the table. And I think teasing and setting up things with Gunther and having that happen in the Final Four with everything on the line and having Brock maybe eliminate Gunther here, that would give Gunther the motivation to go after Brock leading into WrestleMania and set up that huge match. So I think that's one option you can go with. Now, the Final Four scenario number 2 that I have involves Lesnar being replaced by Drew McIntyre. This is why I prefer option 1. Because I do think Drew is a legitimate contender here. I don't think he's going to win, and we have to point this out too real quick. Obviously, the Seth Rollins injury. There are different things in play here to where I think it changes a lot of stuff. Because, we can assume Rollins is going to be good to go for the Rumble match, but we don't, or not Rumble match, for WrestleMania, but we don't know that for sure. So there could be a lot of things in play that we don't know that could really factor into how they do this final sequence here and ultimately who wins the Rumble. But I think Drew has a good chance to get there. The problem is, I think if Drew's not going to be in the title match, which as of right now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I've seen some people say, hey, add it, make it a triple threat, all that. I don't know if that's going to happen. I still think Punk and Rollins, is probably going to be your match in some way, shape, or form. But I think if McIntyre is in the Final Four, here's what that prevents. It prevents a Sami Zayn return and Sami being the one to eliminate Drew to kind of deny him everything he's talked about, right? All the promos with Cody and Punk and Rollins and everybody else. Drew's doing that. By the way, I think Drew's doing the best character type work he's ever done. But Sammy being the one to return, get a little revenge on Drew, and eliminating him, then again, it's a simple setup for a Road to WrestleMania match, because it doesn't, if you're not putting Drew in that match, what's the direction? And I think Sammy would make a lot of sense. These two guys, hey, it's not like a consolation prize, but it is, these are two guys that on kind of both opposite ends of the spectrum now in terms of where they're at. And so I think, this could be a lot of fun to set that up, is have Sammy eliminate Drew. But if Sammy's not in the Final Four, then, well, that can't happen. So that's why I don't know that I think option 2 is the one I would go with. I think option 1 is very intriguing, just to build up, multiple things for the future. Like I said, a Brock eliminating Gunther, perhaps a Punk eliminating Lesnar. And if all that happens, right? Okay, and then it's down to 2. It is CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, the final 2. And I'm just going to tell you, in any scenario, I could do 100 different scenarios here. This would be my final 2. Again, me just fantasy booking it. I just don't think there's another option other than going with Cody Rhodes and CM Punk as the final 2 in this Royal Rumble. They said it themselves on Raw in the promo, and maybe you're like, well, it's too predictable. But I don't care. Predictable works just fine in this scenario because it's exactly the way it should be. It should be these 2 as the final 2. Given everything they said, given everything that's at stake for both of them, it should be these 2 as the final 2 in the Men's Royal Rumble. Now, how do you figure out what's next, right? Like, who wins? How do you get there? All this other stuff. So, here's the way I see it. Cody winning back-to-back Rumbles would be just a tremendous story, right? Like, it'd be, hey, it sells itself. That guarantees that Cody goes on to face Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40. So it takes out all the questions about The Rock. Then you do have questions about The Rock. But it's a different question. It's how does The Rock get there versus how does Cody get there, right? Completely changes. So, that's one option. But, in my opinion, there is way more suspense if Cody is the one that comes up short here. Because that then adds that doubt heading into the Elimination Chamber about whether Cody is actually going to be able to find a way to finish the story. Or if it's going to be The Rock that sort of steals the spot against Reigns. And so you put Cody in a scenario where the stakes have never been higher. He has to win, or that's it, right? He has no other option if he doesn't win whatever scenario he's put in at the Elimination Chamber in Australia. So if that happens, then you have to turn to, well, how does CM Punk win the match? And I'll just say this up front. So it is really wild to me to think about this possibility. And this is why I am a little hesitant in saying that Punk is going to win and or should win. It is wild to really think that Triple H is going to book CM Punk to win the Royal Rumble just a couple months back. Because remember, the last time Punk sort of got to that level, what was that, like Money in Bank 2011? Yeah. Triple H beat him a couple months later. And what at the time just made no sense for a lot of people. And completely sent things off course there for Punk after that incredible match against John Cena, again at Money in the Bank. But to me, I think that if you have Punk win, it completely plays into the story that you've told since he came back in November. And really since the moment his music hit, right? You think about everything we saw after Survivor Series. Seth Rollins losing it, Drew McIntyre walking out, all these things that were kind of thrown about, right? Like what was true, what was not, like all those things. Like that, they did a masterful job of playing up all this. But if you say that, Rollins doesn't want him here, McIntyre doesn't want him here, Cody doesn't want him here. Cody hasn't said that, but look, come on. Who wants CM Punk, right? Who wants this guy in the locker room? So everybody kind of, all those things you can sort of add to the element. And yet Punk walks in, he just got fired from AEW, he walks back into WWE, and he gets a Royal Rumble win handed to him to guarantee him that spot in the WrestleMania main event that he complained about not getting for years. To me, that is like gold, storyline-wise. Like, you could not ask for a better setup if you did it that way. And, again, it puts him then in a spot where he is guaranteed that championship match at WrestleMania against a likely injured Seth Rollins. And so all those things added up to what? To me, it's all the seeds that you could plant for that future CM Punk heel turn, which we all know is going to happen at some point. They couldn't do it right away because the fans were always going to cheer him, all this other stuff, because he's back. CM Punk's back, right? Of course you're going to cheer that. So we know it's coming at some point. And here's the way I see it. And I'm just going to say, like, doing some writing and stuff. Like, I wrote a column about this, actually. This whole Royal Rumble men's sequence. And it's really, I'm kind of looking back at my notes on this as I'm going through this, because I'm like, yeah, this was how we did it. Kind of when we tried to book this in a column I wrote here recently. But it is, the thing about when you turn someone heel is that you don't have to do it in a single segment, right? Remember that first promo from CM Punk. That promo, everybody's like, wait a second, that's not CM Punk. Like, that is not CM Punk. You can't tell me that was him. Like, it felt, he's home. Like, you know, what is this guy talking about? Like, he's the one that was, you know, publicly saying this about WWE all these years and all that stuff. But then, you know, he finishes, they go off the air. He follows it up by saying, hey, I'm in WWE to make money, not friends. Okay, so we add that to what we just saw. All right, great. But then, you know, some of the promos he had with Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre, both guys said things that, as they're saying them, you're like, yeah, they're actually true. You know, they're not wrong about CM Punk. And then it is that promo on Monday where it is Punk saying he's going to do to Cody essentially what The Rock did to him many years ago, while also going as far as to question whether CM Punk, is more of the American dream than Cody Rhodes. There are heel elements in everything that CM Punk has done so far. Not maybe not every little single thing, right? He did wrestle Dominic Mysterio, the ultimate heel. But there have been elements. There have been things that have been easily hidden just based on the fact that the crowd wants to cheer CM Punk right now. And if Cody is one step away from finishing the story, and Punk is the one to eliminate him, maybe even by any means necessary, then what can CM Punk do? He can come out and say, everyone bought it. Hook, line, and sinker from the start. He made it clear from the start that he was essentially playing everyone, and that CM Punk has always been about what's best for CM Punk, and where the fans went wrong is believing anything different. You can sell that story, and especially, I think, look, an injury is never a good thing, but if that is the story you want to sell, you have now basically been handed the opportunity to sell it, knowing that you have an injured Seth Rollins, who Punk could go on to defeat at WrestleMania, to add to that, to say, all right, not only did CM Punk eliminate Cody Rhodes to possibly not allow him to finish the story, but he also decided to take advantage of an injured Seth Rollins to win that title, to get that WrestleMania main event, all these things he's complained about. Is this really the guy we want to cheer? And, like, you can do so much with that. And here's the way I think I wrote this in the column. It's like, there is just something to me that is right about CM Punk versus the world. Is it a risk by having CM Punk win the Rumble, put all your chips on the table in favor of CM Punk, given everything that's happened over the past couple of years? I understand the questions. I understand there's risk involved. But I also seem to me that when I look at the way Triple H books things, he is not afraid to lean into the old Jerry Jarrett quote, right? That personal issues draw money. He has brought that up time and time again on this road to WrestleMania. He's brought it up before then. And I think if you have CM Punk win this Royal Rumble, you set up so many interesting dynamics for the future. Like I said, maybe it is a Brock Lesnar feud down the road. Maybe it's a WrestleMania 41 main event against Cody Rhodes. Maybe there's so many different things you can do if you start building to the fact that at some point or another, CM Punk is going to be a heel. I'm not saying it's going to be right after the Royal Rumble. I don't think that's going to happen. But you can plant the seeds along the way, and I think this is another way you could do that, while also keeping in mind that maybe there is the scenario where, let's say, Roman Reigns loses to Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania, and Roman Reigns takes the sabbatical, right? Like, Roman's already a part-time guy, essentially. Who is left available then? If the bloodline is crumbled, there is a notable wise man who would be available that you could somehow attach back to Punk, and then that leads you into the next sort of wave of stories into WrestleMania 41. There's so many things you can do with this. That's why I think CM Punk would be my choice for the winner of the 2024 Men's Royal Rumble. If I were booking the Rumble match in our series, this is how I would book it. I would book it with CM Punk as the victor and start to plant those seeds towards the eventual heel turn that is going to happen at some point, to then add the suspense of putting Cody in an Elimination Chamber scenario where it is win or go home with a spot at WrestleMania 40 on the line. Then I know you're thinking, okay, well, how do you get to that? If you got The Rock involved and all the other stuff, well, I will let you know when we start booking after the Royal Rumble, because I do think we're going to have some choices to make as we lean into that. So there you go. There were the thoughts on the Rumble, and let me know what you think about this men's and women's Royal Rumble match. All right, so there were some thoughts on the Royal Rumble matches, our fantasy booking here, and also some predictions perhaps as to what will happen in these matches. Let me know what you guys think. Again, I just sort of did this to have a fun discussion because I think it would be kind of exciting to hear you guys' ideas on what you think could happen at the Rumble, what you would do if you were booking the Royal Rumble. Just love the interaction, love the discussion. And, we don't get to do this very often in terms of just the actual reality of the WWE product. Usually we're just talking about, our own little game world here in these saves. So it's kind of fun to get you guys' opinion on what's actually happening in these companies in reality. So, again, I appreciate you guys watching as always. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, share, all that good stuff. And we will, again, start things after the Royal Rumble. Once the show is finished, I am going to, again, hurry to the booking room and try to start putting things together, because usually, as I've said before, I like to sort of be a couple weeks ahead in terms of like booking, but I'm not actually going to be able to start until after the Rumble. So that will, I'll need a little bit of wiggle room there to be able to put these shows together, because I don't want to just throw something together and not have a direction on what we're doing. So I'll keep you guys updated on when that first actual show will drop. But until then, you've got a couple fun episodes here to get you going, and check out everything else on the channel, the TCW save, and some other fun stuff on the way as well. But again, I appreciate you guys as always. And on the next episode of our WWE 2024 save, it will be Raw for February Week 1.